So it looks like I'm live from my car one more time, but that's good. I'm glad I have this opportunity to do this. A lot is going on right now, and so I think these brain hacks are really more important than ever. I love that I'm doing them online, so you can feel safe accessing them, but they're so important right now with everything that's going on with coronavirus and fear. This is like the most important time ever to be doing our practices so that we can know we're safe from this virus, so we can know that we're not going to, that even if we get exposed to the virus, that it's very possible it won't even bother us, or that even if we're exposed and get sick, that we will recover quickly. So today's topic was a quote that from, I don't have that up, but a quote, I think it's from Einstein, that said, you can't solve a problem from the consciousness that created the problem. And a lot of people are interpret this in a way that may or may not be accurate. But what I want to talk about with this is consciousness as a whole. We have such a misconception of consciousness. And so I want to talk about consciousness, not in the way I've talked about it before, but in the way of talking about having an awareness of our consciousness in a way that actually serves us. We talked about this quite a bit on Sunday at the group, which is the fact that our prefrontal cortex, our prefrontal cortex is the last part of our brain that receives information. And so with this being the case, with it being that the part of our brain that we experience as reality, that's everything we know to be, is not the thing that's actually driving the bus. And I've talked about this in a brain hack before. I'm just going to touch on it quickly here. So of all the neurological testing ever in the history of neurology, never has the prefrontal cortex fired first. I want you to hear that, because there's so much out there that says we can use our consciousness to change our subconscious mind. And that's not accurate, not entirely. Now, what our consciousness does, what our prefrontal cortex does, is it does take new information in, and it does alter the subconscious mind, but it only does it according to the rules established by the subconscious mind. So the way I suggest people think of this is, imagine that your life is a car. Your conscious mind, who you are, the way you experience reality, you are sitting in the back seat of that car. And now, what part of your subconscious mind is driving the car? And this is the most important part. And so when we're talking about you can't solve a problem from the consciousness that created it, it's talking about awareness. So what our consciousness is doing is observing subconscious mechanisms. So if you think about it, we're observing the car. We're observing where the car's going, the experience the car's having. I made a joke about it on Sunday that was like, you don't want your amygdala driving your car, because that is a scary ride. And we really do want to think about this, that our levels of consciousness are what we're aware of in the moment. So I want to talk about this from the perspective of thinking of yourself as three different people, or the fact that you, as your conscious mind, can get into one of three different cars. So you have three different drivers available to you. So they are three completely different experiences of life. So think of those as individual identities. Think of yourself as a person who has three separate identities. And we all have this. We all have a triggered state, a rest and digest state, and a fully centered, grounded state. I'm not going to get into the more advanced states. I'm just going to talk about the basic three. So now, and then what I'm going to have you do is think about those as cars you're driving. So you have, sorry, I'm trying to wiggle this as little as possible. Let me get there we go. So we have these 3 different cars we're driving, and the 3 different cars determine how we experience life. So imagine these as drivers. So think of someone you know in your life that is a very anxious, nervous person. So I would say this is your Chicken Little driver, right? This is the sky is falling person. But it's not just fear or doubt. It's confusion, frustration, judgment, anger, and sadness. And so this part of you is you at your worst, right? And just from this consciousness. So instead of thinking of this as fully who you are, think of this as you at your very worst. This is the driver of your car. This is your amygdala. So when your amygdala is driving the car, it is in chaos. It is fearful or confused or depressed or angry or frustrated or judgmental. It's the worst aspects, right? Now, what's happening with your consciousness is that when you're experiencing these worst aspects, so your amygdala always exists. Your worst days, when you're the worst of who you want to be, that always exists in your brain. It doesn't come and go. It's always there. But you're not always consciously participating with it. So your conscious mind isn't always perceiving it. So you can look at it as your conscious mind is the observer. And so when you're looking at the subconscious mechanism of this state of mind, of this amygdala being triggered, what you're consciously experiencing in that moment is the part that your prefrontal cortex is engaged as to whatever level it's engaged. Not a lot at that level. So there's actually, I was talking to a neuroscientist who was saying actually our most self-aware state is fight or flight, because that's when we're only really aware of ourselves. We've lost perspective on the rest of the world and we're just caught up in our own story. So if you think of your conscious mind as an observer, think of virtual reality, like you have virtual reality goggles, or you're in this car. And right now, what your conscious mind is observing is the amygdala engaged. So your awareness is on the experience of being triggered, right? And so that's one of your drivers. That's one level of consciousness. Consciousness is the brain paying attention to that. So right now it's paying attention to what the amygdala is saying. So now let's think of a second identity you have. So when you're not in your worst state, but when you're what I would call the rule follower. So when you're feeling more structured, you know what your plans are, you know what your perspective is, what you're thinking. You believe in what you already know. You're like, I know what I'm doing. I know my plan. I have an agenda, or I'm figuring it out. This is the part of your brain that when people offer new things might say, I don't do it that way. Like, that's not how I do it, or that doesn't work for me. This is a history-based perception. So this is who you've been up to today. So there's a thing I talk about a lot in my groups where people say, well, what if I really want to make a change, but I don't want to be inaccurate? So, for example, if I'm a person like, I've recently stopped having coffee in my house because I decided I wasn't drinking enough water because I love coffee too much. So I was drinking coffee instead. So to make myself drink more water, I just thought I won't have coffee in my house and I'll only have coffee when I go out. So in the past, I would have called myself a coffee drinker. I would have said coffee was really important to me. One of the things I've taught people to say is when you make a major change like that, when it doesn't feel like you're speaking the truth, like if you've been codependent in the past and you want to change that, but you don't quite feel you're not codependent anymore, what I would say is historically, I was a coffee drinker, or historically I was codependent, or historically I did this. Then I'm talking about that being my history, and I'm saying that something else is possible. Well, when you're in this rule follower consciousness, you're living in the historical, who you've been historically, and you're letting that be the definition of who you are. So You're in this state where where you have your rules, you've established what they are, you're locked in to what your brain already knows. And you may not be panicked or stressed or anything about it. It may be working for you right now, but it is a limited perception base, and it's based just off your history, right? And so that's the other driver of your car. So you have this Chicken Little who drives like a crazy maniac and panics and makes snap decisions that it regrets later. Like somebody says something and then you blow up and then later on you regret it. Or you make a decision to date someone that you wish you hadn't have dated, or all of these things we do. We make decisions from this Chicken Little state. And then when we're moving more into the rule follower, this is the part of our brain that goes, I know exactly where I'm going. I'm going this way. I'm not going to take any side roads. I know my direction, and I know what's best for me. This is the contriving state of mind. Again, this is a lot more reliable driver. This is a driver you want over the Chicken Little driver. But I want to talk about one more identity. And again, when you're in the state of consciousness where you have the rules and the structure that you're following, it is just your prefrontal cortex, just your consciousness being aware of that part of your brain. It doesn't mean Chicken Little doesn't exist anymore. You're just not listening to Chicken Little right now. You're just not in Chicken Little's car at the moment, but Chicken Little still has a car. So that's the biggest thing to understand about consciousness is my consciousness is whatever my focus is on, whatever I'm paying attention to. Am I paying attention to the part of my brain that's freaking out? Or am I paying attention to the part of my brain that has structure? So it's where is my attention? Where is my awareness? Now, another part of our brain that exists in everyone, even if you've never experienced it, is the innovator identity. This innovator doesn't know what's next, and it likes it. It likes not to have a plan. It likes to be able to make a decision in a moment. It feels confident and secure that it will make the right decision, that it'll know what to do next when the time comes. So it believes in possibility. This identity is calm and centered, and it is steeped in faith that it will know. So imagine being in the back seat of a car, driven by someone that says, I don't know where we're going, but as we're moving along, I trust I'll make the right decisions of which way to go. So I don't know what's happening, but I know myself and I have faith in me. So no matter what happens, we'll be okay, right? This is the innovator part of the brain. Again, not everybody has consciously experienced this part of their brain about being innovative and calmed and centered without a plan, without a structure, no panic, bombs going off around me, and just saying, that's all right. There are bombs. I don't know why there are bombs, but we'll figure it out. We're going to be okay. And this is the innovator, and we all have it. That's the thing we need to know is even if you haven't experienced it, this does exist in your brain. You just haven't experienced it yet, and you can, right? So what I want to do now that I've established those three, so you have your Chicken Little, your rule follower, and your innovator. And they're all three identities that are you, and you're consciously experiencing one of those three, right? Now I want you to think about coronavirus. What is your perspective of coronavirus right now? Do you feel like a Chicken Little? Do you feel like you're panicking, like you're not sure what to do, like things aren't going to be okay, or like you're afraid to leave your house, or like this is the end of the world? Or that would be a Chicken Little. Then that's all. It's not a feeling. There's nothing wrong with it. That's just the part of your brain you're observing right now. The second one is, when you think of coronavirus, do you feel clear? Do you feel centered? I know the rules. I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to follow this structure. I'm going to flatten the curve. I'm going to follow the data pack. I'm going to do whichever method or process I believe. I have everything planned out for what to do next. I'm becoming prepared. I'm stockpiling. I'm doing all these different things to be prepared. So that's your rule follower. If you're experiencing that, again, you're in that part of the brain that has a plan. Now, The last one we have here, the last one to think of is, when you think of coronavirus, do you feel innovative? Do you feel like, I don't know, I'm just going to observe? This is a situation where I can't possibly know what's going to happen next. So what I'm going to do is observe myself. I'm going to observe this process. I'm going to observe what's happening overall each day as it happens. Like for me today, I'm sitting in a Beans and Brews with my web developer, and we're in a meeting, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, all restaurants are closed at 11 p.m. tonight. And they come over and say, okay, you're the last people that get to sit here. We're going to be open tomorrow, but you can't dine in. You can only come in, order a coffee, and leave. No one can sit down. And it was like, interesting. Okay, what am I going to do next? How am I going to handle that? I can't see that coming, but do I feel innovative about it? Or does that put me into Chicken Little? Or am I going to start structuring? And the innovative perspective is going to be interesting. Okay, what am I going to do in this one situation? And this next step, what is my plan? And so again, we're going to think about those three different perspectives. And what I'd like you to do this week, and what we're going to talk about, is I'd like you to continue to keep asking yourself, who am I in this moment? Which driver am I experiencing? In which car am I in? And then see if you can't shift cars. If you're feeling yourself panic, is there a practice you can do to stimulate the right brain function to be more centered and calm? Again, when we're in that innovator, we have a lot more creative potential. We're thinking impossibility. So the options available to us are more open. So can I actually go into that state from being in one of these other states? So I want you to go through the week and keep asking yourself, who am I in response to what's happening? Who am I as I'm moving through this concept of coronavirus? And try observing yourself after practices. So do your practices every day, and after your practices, ask yourself, how do I feel? And just use coronavirus, because it's such a big topic right now, just use it as a baseline for how you're going to make your decisions. So what you can do is just say, okay, this is a baseline. And so what I'm going to do is, when I do my practices, after I'm done with my practices, I'm going to ask, how do I feel about coronavirus right now? That'll tell you how successful your practices are. That is a perfect gauge, because this is a thing that's going to create panic in a lot of people. But if we can stay calm and centered, panic will do us no good. That doesn't help us stay safe. The thing that makes us safest is to be able to be innovative, to be able to make decisions and have clarity. So see if you can adjust it if you are in a panic state, or if you're trying to control what's happening. So throughout the week, that'll be the exercise. So before I log off, I want to tell you, because restaurants are closing and they're not allowed to have gatherings or have people sit in, I am going to be live online Wednesday night for the discussion group. Think of questions now, because I'm going to log on live Wednesday at 6:30. And if there are no questions, if there's no one in the live chat connecting and asking questions, I will give a little bit of information from the extended brain hack, but then if I don't get any interaction, I'll probably just log off. So if you want to log on, if you have questions, either be there Wednesday night at 6:30 on YouTube, or send me questions in either Meetup, on Facebook, on Instagram, or put comments in this video. I will look at them before Wednesday, and I will begin the session with answering any questions people have sent in. And then I'll continue watching the online chat for more questions as we go. So we're going to try a first online session. I figured this is the best solution for the fact that we won't be able to meet at the Clever Bean. So I think that's it for today. Post your questions if you're concerned or anything about it. And I will do everything I can to help you with exercises and ways to not be in anxiety, ways to not be stressed out by what's going on. I really want to be here for you and support you in navigating the world and everything that happens in the most conscious, that your conscious experience is the most centered possible. There's no reason to be miserable. There's no reason to be scared. We don't need to exist in that consciousness. There are other options. It doesn't mean things aren't happening. Things are happening, but there's a way we can experience those. And so, like I said, doing our practices is more important than ever. I've been talking about it for 6 years now, and now is the time. If you've been putting it off, if you've been saying, oh, I'll get to those, or it's not a priority, now more than ever it is, because you don't want to get sick. And as everyone is getting sick around you, you want to be able to manage that